Research in the field of motivational psychology reveals an intriguing pattern. People who achieve their goals through constant self-coercion often experience emotional burnout and derive less satisfaction from their accomplishments compared to those driven by intrinsic motivation. This is supported by the extensive studies of Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, the creators of self-determination theory, who demonstrated that the more external pressure we face, the lower our intrinsic motivation and satisfaction with the results. Welcome to the Nucleus Animi Project, where we explore the depths of the human psyche and find paths to genuine happiness. Today we'll discuss why forcing ourselves to do things often leads to negative outcomes and how to find a natural path to achieving goals. By the end of this video, you'll have practical tools for identifying your true desires and building a healthy relationship with your motivation. If you're interested in self-development without self-coercion, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Now let's delve into why we often try to force ourselves. From childhood, we're surrounded by a world that constantly compels us to do things. First, parents make us eat healthy food and go to bed on time. Then school demands discipline and good grades, and society continually reminds us of the need to meet certain standards of success. It's no wonder that over time, we begin to see coercion as the only way to achieve our goals. Psychologist Alfie Kohn, in his book Punished by Rewards, describes how a system of rewards and punishments in early childhood instills the belief that any development requires external pressure. We become accustomed to ignoring internal signals and focusing solely on external criteria for success. In her classic studies, anthropologist Margaret Mead discovered societies where children developed without strict coercion, following their natural interests. Her work showed that such an approach fostered more harmonious personalities with high intrinsic motivation. Interestingly, these cultures had few mental health issues common in Western societies. A vivid example of how coercion can be harmful is the story of Steve Jobs. In his famous commencement speech at Stanford, he recounted how he dropped out of college because he saw no point in spending his parents' money on an education that didn't inspire him. Instead, he began attending calligraphy classes, following his interest. This seemingly useless pursuit later became the foundation for the beautiful typography of the first Macintosh. This story perfectly illustrates what psychologists call the principle of delayed relevance. When we follow our true interests, even if they seem useless at the moment, they often lead to unexpected and valuable outcomes in the future. Modern research in motivational psychology confirms that people driven by intrinsic motivation demonstrate higher productivity and creativity than those guided by external coercion. They also experience significantly less stress and are more resilient to professional burnout. Neuroscientist Bruce Perry's research shows how constant self-coercion affects the nervous system. Our brains are wired to perceive any coercion as a threat, activating the sympathetic nervous system and causing stress. When we continually force ourselves to do things, we essentially live in a state of chronic stress, depleting our physical and emotional resources. Psychologist Carl Rogers offered a wonderful metaphor. A person is like a seed containing everything necessary for full development. Our true nature doesn't need coercion. It needs the right conditions for natural growth. Just as a gardener doesn't pull a plant up by its top to make it grow faster, but creates favorable conditions for its development, we must learn to create conditions for our natural growth, rather than trying to force it through constant coercion. Let's now examine the specific consequences of constant self-coercion. Neuroscience research shows that regularly suppressing natural impulses negatively affects the prefrontal cortex, the brain area responsible for decision-making and creative thinking. This explains why, under constant self-coercion, it becomes increasingly difficult to find creative solutions and feel joy in what we do. Imagine a car constantly running at high RPMs. It can maintain high speed for a while, but eventually the engine will overheat, fuel consumption will increase, and the risk of breakdown will rise. Our bodies function similarly under constant self-coercion. There's an ancient Chinese parable about a farmer dissatisfied with how slowly his rice shoots were growing. Every day he pulled them up a little, trying to speed up their growth. Soon all the plants died. This story perfectly illustrates how attempts to force natural processes often lead to the opposite result. In a state of constant self-coercion, our bodies produce elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. According to the World Health Organization, chronic stress is a key factor in developing depression and anxiety disorders and can lead to weakened immunity, sleep problems, and impaired memory and concentration. Psychologist Gabor Mate, in his book When the Body Says No, describes how ignoring internal signals and constant self-coercion can lead to psychosomatic illnesses. He provides numerous cases from his practice where people who suppress their true needs for years face serious health issues. An interesting example is the experience of renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma. In his memoirs, he recounts how he hated practicing music as a child due to his parents' strict coercion. Only when he was allowed to play what he truly enjoyed and at his own pace did he discover a genuine passion for music. Today, he is one of the most successful and influential musicians in the world. If you recognize yourself in these examples, share your experience in the comments. How has self-coercion affected your life? Your story could help others realize the importance of treating themselves more gently. Now let's turn to the remarkable book, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. The author describes the state of flow, a unique state of complete immersion and natural motivation that occurs only when activities align with our true interests and abilities. In this state, we not only achieve better results, but also experience deep satisfaction from the process itself. You'll find links to this and other mentioned books in the description below the video. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research reveals an interesting pattern. People driven by intrinsic motivation often exhibit what she calls a growth mindset. They view challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to their self-esteem, making them more resilient to failures. Cognitive psychology research shows that when we act against our natural inclinations, our brains expend significant energy suppressing internal resistance. It's like trying to swim against the current. We can stay afloat for a while, but eventually our strength will wane. So how do we learn to recognize our true desires and distinguish them from imposed goals? Psychologist Marshall Rosenberg offers a simple yet effective technique. Whenever making a decision, ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to or because I have to? If the answer is have to, the next question is, what will happen if I don't do it? Often we find that many mandatory actions aren't truly necessary. Psychologist Tara Brach suggests an additional tool, the practice of mindful pause. When you feel the urge to force yourself to do something, stop for a moment and pay attention to your body's sensations. Where do you feel tension? What emotions accompany this decision? Often it's the body that first signals us when we're acting against our true desires. A notable example is Olympic champion Simone Biles, who made an unprecedented decision at the Tokyo Olympics. She withdrew from several competitions, listening to her internal state. Initially met with criticism, this decision was later recognized as a turning point in sports, highlighting the importance of mental health and self-awareness. Emotional intelligence researcher Mark Brackett notes that distinguishing our true desires is a skill that can be learned. He suggests keeping an emotional journal, recording not only decisions, but also the emotions they evoke. Over time, patterns emerge, helping us better understand ourselves. This reminds me of a story from Greek mythology about sirens, creatures whose singing was so enchanting that sailors would plunge into the sea to their doom. But sirens are actually a metaphor for external expectations and social pressures, which can be so convincing that we forget our true desires. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's research shows that our bodies often recognize the right decision before our conscious minds do. He described the mechanism of somatic markers, physical sensations that help us determine what truly matters. These can be slight tension in the stomach, a quickened heartbeat, or a feeling of expansion in the chest. All these signals carry important information about what truly resonates with our nature and what doesn't. In her work, psychologist Barbara Fredrickson describes a special type of positive emotions that arise when we act in alignment with our true desires. These resonant emotions are not only pleasant, but also facilitate personal growth and strengthen social connections. She compares them to a compass pointing the direction of our genuine development. Psychologist Rick Hansen suggests the practice of taking in the good. When you do something following an internal impulse, linger in the moment for 20-30 seconds, allowing the positive sensations to fully manifest. This helps the brain form new neural connections, strengthening the ability to distinguish and follow true desires. Numerous career development studies show that people who choose a profession based on intrinsic motivation often achieve outstanding results and become leaders in their fields, compared to those driven mainly by external factors. This confirms the old wisdom: when we follow our calling, success naturally follows. Now let's explore specific steps to develop natural motivation. Start by acknowledging a simple truth. Our bodies are incredibly complex and wise systems that know what they need. The problem is, we've forgotten how to listen to this inner wisdom. Imagine your intuition as a quiet but wise companion, drowned out by the constant noise of social expectations and self-criticism. To hear this inner voice, we must learn to create moments of silence in our lives. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, known for his work on emotional intelligence, suggests the practice of emotional scanning. Spend a few minutes each morning tuning into your feelings and emotions without trying to change or judge them. Regularly practicing this kind of scanning helps restore the connection with your inner compass. Dr. Kristen Neff, a researcher on self-compassion, emphasizes the importance of developing a kind attitude towards oneself in the pursuit of natural motivation. She suggests asking yourself, what would I advise a close friend to do in this situation? Often we offer others wiser and more compassionate advice than we do ourselves. Famed writer and mountaineer Jan Krakauer once said, "The most important mountains we have to climb are within our own minds." This metaphor beautifully describes the journey to natural motivation. It's less about battling oneself and more about exploring one's inner landscape. Modern psychology emphasizes the benefits of a mindful approach to goal setting over traditional methods of coercion and rigid discipline. Research shows that a mindful approach leads to more sustainable results and better psychological well-being. Psychologist Elaine Aron, who studies highly sensitive people, found that being attentive to internal signals is especially crucial for those naturally more receptive to stimuli. She recommends regularly practicing processing breaks, short pauses throughout the day to become aware of one's feelings and needs. Here are some practical steps to help you start this journey. First, keep an energy journal. Note which activities energize you and which deplete you. Second, practice micro-choices. Start with small decisions based on internal impulses, like choosing where to have lunch or your route to work. Third, regularly ask yourself, if no one ever knew the results, would I still do this? Psychotherapist Irvin Yalom suggests the technique of life review. Imagine looking at your life from a bird's eye view. Which moments filled you with energy and joy? What did you do not because you had to, but because you genuinely wanted to? These memories can serve as beacons in the search for natural motivation. A remarkable example of this approach is the story of Matthew McConaughey. In his autobiography, he shares how turning down roles in romantic comedies that brought him success and wealth in favor of deeper dramatic roles he was truly drawn to led him to win an Oscar. This decision seemed illogical from a career standpoint, but was fully in line with his inner aspirations. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi notes the best moments in our lives are not the passive, relaxing times, but those when our bodies or minds are stretched to their limits voluntarily. It's important to understand that rejecting coercion doesn't mean rejecting effort. On the contrary, when we act in line with our inner drives, we're capable of much greater efforts and achievements. Psychologist Susan David, in her research on emotional agility, found that people who can distinguish between an internal drive for growth and external pressure demonstrate higher resilience to stress and achieve more meaningful long-term results. This is akin to the difference between how bamboo grows and how other plants grow. In its early years, bamboo shows little growth above ground. All its energy is focused on developing a root system. But when the time comes, it can grow several meters in just a few weeks. Similarly, when we follow natural rhythms of development, the results may not seem immediate, but they are more sustainable and impressive. Consider the story of Albert Einstein, who was considered an average student in school due to his reluctance to follow the standard curriculum. However, his passion for physics and mathematics, which he pursued at his own pace and in his own way, led to a revolution in science. As he himself said, "I never forced myself to learn, I just followed my curiosity." Psychotherapist Esther Perel notes an interesting paradox. The more we allow ourselves to be ourselves, the easier it is to achieve truly challenging goals. This is because the energy previously spent fighting ourselves can now be directed towards real achievements. Neuropsychologist Rick Hansen discusses the importance of self-directed neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections based on experience. When we regularly practice following internal impulses instead of coercion, we literally rewire our brains for a more effective way of achieving goals. Start today. Choose one area of your life where you often use coercion and try a new approach. Instead of forcing yourself, ask what truly attracts you to this activity. You might find that the path to your goal can be not only effective, but also enjoyable. Remember, every time you choose to act from intrinsic motivation instead of coercion, you're not only taking a step towards a more authentic life, but also creating a new neural pathway in your brain, making this choice more natural and easier. If you found this video helpful, support our channel by subscribing and liking. Here you'll find many other materials on psychology, self-development, and the path to an authentic life. Thank you for watching, and remember, your body and mind are wise advisors, and it's worth learning to listen to them.